Now maybe the Raiders and their fan base felt like they had some reason for hope and optimism heading into 2022. They certainly acted like they did. And maybe there was a reason for it. I don't know. Coming off of the playoff appearance, even after all the drama with John Gruden and then riding with Rich Bisaccia for the rest of the year. Clearly the Raiders felt like they were a lot closer than they really were. Hence the big trade for Davante Adams. You go and give up a first and second round pick of the 2022 draft to bring him in and then give him a big contract. Then you go bring in somebody like Chandler Jones. You're not doing that to try and win 6 or 7 games. You're doing that because you think you can take a run at the Chiefs. You could get past the Chargers at a minimum. You think you could potentially win the division and for sure be a playoff team. So maybe they felt like hiring Josh McDaniels was going to be the difference. I don't know. Certainly things did not go according to plan based off of where the Raiders likely felt they were going to be in 2022. I can't imagine this was the outcome or the result that they were seeking based off of what they did in the offseason. And I can't imagine their fan base felt like this was going to be the outcome or the scenario they were going to be facing. You were probably expecting a lot more. But hey, this is what you got. And you can certainly point to some things that went right for the Raiders this past season. You could say, at least with Davante Adams, you brought him in and statistically he lived up to his billing. He lived up to the price tag. So it's not a trade that you instantly regret because of the capital you paid and the money you spent on him and then got limited production. You certainly did not. He had a great season statistically. You also had Josh Jacobs have a monster season statistically. So you had an elite wide receiver outside. You had your running back, former first-round pick Josh Jacobs, give you an elite performance this year at the running back position. And then you look on defense, Max Crosby had another really good season. You know, when you think about the star system of the NFL and you need some big-time stars, you would look at the Raiders and say they had some of those big-time stars. But it clearly wasn't enough because there were plenty of things that went wrong this year. Their passing game was less than what it should have been. They only got 9 games from Darren Waller, 10 games from Hunter Renfrow, so it's 2 other key weapons in their passing game that you would look to complement Davante Adams weren't there. The defense was still really bad across the board. That's been a trend and a theme for the entire Derek Carr era with the Raiders. Chandler Jones, somebody brought in to help improve the defense, only had 4.5 sacks. 9 of the team's 11 losses were by 7 points or less, and within that, you had 5 of those games where they lost by 3 points or less. And when you look at the Raiders, you say, well, that's a talent thing. Was it really? It may be a talent thing, but it's likely the talent or lack of talent at the head coaching position. Losing that many games in that close fashion with some of the players they did have on this roster is a direct reflection on Josh McDaniels and just how bad of a head coach he was in 2022. That's what it comes down to. Especially when you look at the whole notion with Derek Carr, and you could see that McDaniels wasn't able to get more out of him. And at least, if nothing else, the other thing that went right for this Raiders organization this year is they finally came to their senses with Derek Carr and said, you know what, he's just not that level of dude. How long do you continue to tie yourself to him? Do you really want to continue to pay him $40 million a year to be an average NFL starting quarterback? And you'll see, like, there's always the dumb dicks on Twitter, right, that'll talk about, well, it's not Derek Carr's fault because of the defense. It's not even about whether or not it's his fucking fault. This is what should not be that hard to understand, but seems to be incredibly difficult for folks to comprehend. It's a reality of, do you want to pay that much money to a quarterback who is no better than the third best quarterback in your division, and if Russell Wilson plays a little bit better in 2023, might be the worst quarterback in the division? You can't look at Mahomes and Herbert and then look at Derek Carr and say that Carr is on that level. That's just psychotic. He's been there. He's been your starter for almost a decade now. You don't win more. You don't do more. He is just one of many contributing factors as to why. I don't know, sometimes certain fan bases, I see it with the Bears all the time. And you still have Bears fans to this day that will pound the table for Mitchell Trubisky and Jay Cutler. Ding dong, dumb dicks, they fucking sucked. Derek Carr is not that dude. And to continue to want to pay him $40 million a year to be an average NFL starting quarterback is really dumb dick behavior. And if you really want to pound the table for that and champion that, then you deserve to have your fucking head examined, or you need to. No, the reality is when they brought in frickin' John Gruden to begin with and gave him that 10-year, $100 million deal, the first thing they should have done is torn that team down to the fucking studs and started over. That failure to really start over created the problem to where you are now. You thought you were going to have some reason for hope and you had expectations heading into 2022, and then you see the result of what frickin' happened. Like, you can argue all you want about what type of quarterback Derek Carr is, but unless you're saying he's a middle of the road quarterback, you're wrong. He's not going to get any better. He is who he is. Have the Raiders done a terrible job of building up the defense? Absolutely. Do they still look kind of bad for the Khalil Mack trade in certain respects? Absolutely. But their defense stunk with Khalil Mack, and a few years later it stinks without him, so what the fuck is the difference? I'm just saying. So, they had to make this decision, and at least they finally did it. And they have some big off-season decision to make too, right? Like Josh Jacobs. What are you going to do with him? Are you going to bring him back? Are you going to keep Davante Adams? If you're going to go with a young quarterback, do you want Davante Adams there? Do you want to move on? And do you want to start rebuilding? And then most importantly of all, who's going to be the quarterback for this team going forward? It clearly isn't going to be Derek Carr, so who is it going to be? And with the Raiders sitting at the 7th pick, you know, it's a tricky spot because they are in striking range with a big trade up. They would be able to get the quarterback of their choice, or maybe they could sit there at 7th and get a quarterback out of this draft, but you might get the 3rd or 4th choice, and you might have to be able to be comfortable with that. Or depending upon how the draft plays out, you never know. Like somebody could jump in front of them, and all of a sudden you're sitting there at pick 7, and none of those quarterbacks are available, and you're frickin' screwed. And what are you going to do, ride with Jarrett Stidham in 2023? We got to do something. But the bottom line is this, is that the Raiders weren't going anywhere with David Carr. And why can I say that? Because you have almost a decade of history to show they weren't going anywhere with David Carr. There was absolutely no reason to continue to hitch your wagon to him, pay him $40 million a year to sit there and win 6 and 7 games. It doesn't even have to be an indictment on Derek Carr himself. It doesn't have to be a statement of anything negative towards Derek Carr himself. It's just a reality. And you might start to see other teams make these types of decisions too, to really sit there and say, hey, do you want to be like the Vikings and be paying Kirk Cousins a ton of money and know that your ceiling is always going to be capped as a team? You know, that's a lot of money to tie up into a starting quarterback that's not going to give you elite level play. That's all I'm saying. So we'll see what happens with the Raiders in 2023. But at this moment, you have no reason to think it's going to be anything other than a lot of what you saw in 2022, maybe worse, and that Josh McDaniels will be shit canned at the end of the year.